And we can get started. All right, so this is James MacPhail of Tongue Dancer Wines. So thank you for joining me today.
Yes,
I would just like to start with you talking a little bit about your background, because I know you've been in the business for many years, um, but Tongue Dancer is a fairly new project, yes?
it is. It was born in 2012,
Okay.
and it was born out of, well, time when I had just sold my previous brand, MacPhail Family Wines, that I had started in 2000. I had sold that to the Hess Collection in 2011. And when I sold it, we wanted to kind of keep the grower relations that I had built over the years.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, had a winery in our backyard that we still had to repurpose and keep going, and kind of get back to the small lot, the real kind of artisanal, hands-on winemaking that MacPhail had kind of taken off to a level that was kind of got a little bit out of that realm.
It was all
So
grown up. It was ready to move on.
exactly. So that's kind of how Tongue Dancer started.
Mhm.
When Hess purchased the brand, I signed the 5-year contract to stay on as winemaker,
Mhm.
and wasn't quite sure how long that was going to last. Very, similar situation, similar scenario in this industry as others, but
Yep.
so just kind of wanted to keep that type of winemaking going.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And so you're based here in Sonoma, correct?
I'm in Healdsburg.
Oh, you're in
Yes.
Healdsburg. Okay, perfect. So yeah, I'm in Sonoma City, so we're sort of county
Okay.
neighbors there.
Yeah.
And yeah, I noticed that most of the vineyards that you're working with, I mean, you work with some pretty notable names. We got Bacigalupi, Pratt. I mean, these are some good vineyards that you've been working with. I mean, I know you said they're relationships that you've had for many years. How are you deciding which ones to work with? Since you're creating such small batches, I assume that's a very selective process for you.
It is, and I think that after 29 years in this industry, I have kind of established a reputation of quality, high quality winemaking, and
Mhm.
I'm easy to work with. I'm fun to work with,
Hey guys,
and
little self promotion here. He's fun to work
right,
with. Anybody wants to sign up?
uh, and then most importantly, we pay our bills. So
Mhm.
growers love that.
Sure.
That's, I mean,
Yeah.
really, with all my projects that I have 67 vineyards that I work with in
Wow.
Sonoma County.
Okay.
And yes, I've got everything from as the San Giacomo's down there in Carneros,
Mhm.
uh, to Tongue Dancer, Bacigalupi, Pratt, Putnam out in Annapolis.
Mhm.
Uh, I've got 22 Dutton vineyards in Green Valley, and so um, I'm around.
And so
I'm
do
around.
those all go into wines under the Tongue Dancer label, or do you
Oh,
kind of mix every vintage, like who gets a single vineyard, or what goes into this like generic, I don't want to say generic because that sounds lame, but the general Sonoma Coast label?
right. So for Tongue Dancer, the Chardonnays are specific for Tongue Dancer. So Pratt, Bacigalupi, and
Hmm.
then just recently picked up a vineyard that I used to work with for MacPhail called Vine Hill,
Okay.
which is always one of my favorites. It's on Vine Hill Road in Sebastopol. And then the Pinots, which of course we'll taste and get to. The
Hmm.
Putnam is specifically for Tongue Dancer. The
Okay.
only wine that sometimes overlaps, maybe a barrel or two from another client,
Hmm.
is Sonoma Coast.
Okay.
Because I make I kind of joke when I say my day job with my other clients of
Hmm.
making wine,
Hmm.
but I have a couple of very large projects,
Okay.
and all the way down to 1 barrel projects. So
Great.
I have the gamut of being able to kind of maybe a little bit pick and choose.
Hmm.
Um, if I needed another barrel of Pinot, or from another place in the Sonoma Coast, if that client doesn't want to bottle, you know, the quantity that they have, I have kind of first right to, you know. So the Sonoma Coast Pinot, for tongue dancer, is the one that sometimes gets a little bit of another client Pinot.
Okay, cool. So yeah,
Yeah.
why don't we start with the Chardonnay? I have in front of me both the Prat and the Bacigalupi, and I did go ahead and taste these a little bit beforehand. So I'm going to say,
Good.
let's start with the Prat. It seems to be a little of the lighter, higher acid, more kind of fresher primary fruit flavor profile. And why don't you just tell me a little bit about your kind of winemaking philosophy, or maybe your protocols? It seems like these two are, I mean, they're obviously very different. So I'm just kind of wondering what kind of goes through your brain when you're deciding how to treat these two different vineyards.
Great question, because I'll take one step back and tell you how the Prat came to be.
Yeah,
because
perfect.
the first Chardonnay that we made in 2012 was the Bacigalupi. So the Bacigalupis used to make their brand here at my winery for many years. And so, and I had known Pam Bacigalupi for a long time. And so I got on the waiting list, and then finally got some fruit in 2012. It worked out perfect. But that site, as you know, down on West Side Road here, it's a little bit of a, well, the growers right there call it the banana belt, because it's the section on West Side it's warmer. Fog breaks, etc. So the Bacigalupi style of Chardonnay always kind of lent itself to that richer, bigger style, you know, a little bit more kind of voluptuous. So we had that Chardonnay, and I always wanted to make, you know, the yin to the yang, right? So something like the Prat, a little bit more, you know, crisper, brighter, etc. So Jim Pratt, longtime friend of mine, one of the great growers of Sonoma County, buying fruit for him since I started MacPhail in 2000. Called me up and said, "Hey, I've got this certified organic block of Chardonnay, one of my vineyards off of Occidental Road, and client just gave her up. Do you want it?" And I was like, "Yes, I do." So it was perfect. It was about a 2.5 ton lot. Our press here is 2.5 ton press, so it was a perfect size.
I noticed that your barrel or your production is pretty small on most of your wines, actually.
Yes, yeah. So Tongue Dancer Wines is very small. We're a total of, I think, 1,200 cases out of 7 wines now. So yeah, so 100, 125, 150 case lots. But this Prat is like the Bacigalupi as well. I very vineyard driven winemaker. So you know, hand picked, hand sorted, whole cluster press, take the juice. And for this, for the Prat, I do go to tank. So I press the juice, put it to tank, let it settle, and then to barrel the next day. Little less lees contact. And this is Carrie, just came in.
Hi, Carrie.
Hi. Hey, you can pick up your guitar, and we'll pick up our little ukulele, and we'll have a jam session.
There you go. There you go.
I'll make them play the ukulele. So for the Prat, then to keep that, you know, a little zippier style, a little leaner, racier, settle it overnight, and then to barrel. Yeah. Whereas the Bacigalupi, I go straight to barrel. So I don't settle out the gross lees. I, you know, get all that good stuff into the barrel, and a lot more stirring, a lot more battonage.
That's what I was going to ask. It tastes like it had a lot of love and a lot of attention to it. Yeah. Yeah,
it does.
But what I actually also enjoyed about the Prat here is, you know, it's definitely the crisper, lighter, fresher style, like we're saying, but it still has just like a touch of a phenolic grip, just kind of like around the perimeter of the tongue, so that you still get a little bit of that texture and that intrigue. It's not bitter or anything like that, but it's just, it gives it a little bit more than like your simpler Chardonnays.
Exactly, like more like steely. You know, yes. Yeah. So this sees about, I think it was about 25, I think one new barrel.
Okay.
But the new barrels that I use for Chardonnay are very, very subtle. A little bit more elegant driven, water bent, not fire bent. So not imparting, a whole lot of.
And so the other thing I have to ask too, and I might as well just ask it with this first wine, is you have like the most interesting labels and little note cards that come here. And clearly, you've got your ukulele in the background. Music and art is a very
Yes.
important thing. And I like how my point shoes are right here next to the point shoes. Can you tell me like a little bit about that part of the artistic expression? I mean, I hate to say it, but we still do kind of judge wines by labels, and yours are, very, they're very out there.
I grew up in an extremely artistic household. My parents were really into art. I was actually trained a classical pianist. And I think that was going to be a career of mine. But unfortunately in my 20s, I chopped off a finger. And so, and so that my musical career came to an end, but that kind of translated into other artistic things, I think.
Sure.
We have worked with a graphic artist here in town. His name is Chris Blum. I think he's semi-retired. I'm not quite sure. But he was Levi Strauss's original art director in the 60s and 70s. And he lived in Healdsburg. He's very well known. He's done a lot of album covers, food packaging, and just brilliant, like outside the box. And he and I have collaborated on, like maybe 7 brands, I think, over my career that I've started, or for one client or another, and just love working with him. And so our process is really cool. His office is in the oldest house in Healdsburg that was built in 1876, and that's his. Do you know where the shed is?
Yeah.
His office is right behind the shed on that alley. Got a windmill in front, and it was built in 1876, and rickety floors and everything. But I go into his office and we sit down at his little table, and when we started Tongue Dancer, I told him the story that I always wanted to have a wine that kind of spoke about mouthfeel, texture, weight, a lot of those elements in wine that I feel are kind of starting to kind of, be missed, right? And so he's got a pencil and little 3x5 note cards, and I'm telling the story of what this brand's going to be, and he's writing down words, and he'll flip the card up with a word. And like the first one was like, no. The second one was like, no. And then he flipped up Tongue Dancer. And I'm like, that's it. Now we got to put a graphic to it.
Right.
But so he was actually the one that came up with Tongue Dancer.
Okay. No, it's great. I mean, and like each of the labels, I'll just kind of show them up in here, but they have, different little expressions. And I really like this one for the Bacigalupi, just because it's that kind of woodsy, earthy, and kind of like storybook, and you get that kind of comfort from the wine when you taste it. And it's interesting having them side by side. Even the color is just a little bit deeper on the Bacigalupi, and it kind of has that sepia. I mean, the wine's not sepia, but the sepia tone on your labels like completely connotes that kind of feeling. So it's an interesting correlation between what's in the bottle and what's in the
well, we're lucky too, that since we're so small, we can have very artistic labels. We don't have to like really come up with that brand that's going to go on the store shelf. That you can kind of have fun with it. Which I always love to do. You're allowed to tailor make them
for the different wines that you want to, instead of having to have like your one stamp. Right?
Yeah.
So you did talk a little bit already about the Bacigalupi wine. Was there anything else that you wanted to mention perhaps about this vintage in particular? This is the 2018 that we're drinking.
Yeah, the 18. Yeah. So, well, the 18 has really, I think, surprised me.
Mm-hmm.
And I know it surprised a lot of my peers. As you know, 18 was a little bit of a bumper crop. It was the largest crop that we'd had, I think, since 12.
I remember reporting that.
Throughout the years. Yeah. And so I think, I talked to my kind of veteran viticulturists and everything else. And, is there a scientific reason why? No, we don't really know why, but we think that, just in an elementary sense, the vines were like excited, that after all those years of drought and then those big rains in 17 and the vines just kind of flourished. And typically in a bit of a bumper crop vintage, you don't get the flavors and you don't get the characteristics and you don't get the malics and everything else.
Less concentrated.
But we got it. And we got it. And so we're like, wow. So where does that theory go? Like, bumper crop is a lower vintage, it's not. It's the Chardonnays are extremely expressive, interesting, fun. Same with the Pinots. I mean, all the 18s I've tasted, I think have really, bottom line, just kind of surprised us.
I wonder if it at all has to do with, Bacigalupi is a very historic vineyard, and I don't know how old these vines are in particular, but do you think perhaps it has something to do with the experience of the vines being able to produce, like they kind of know what to do?
Absolutely. Oh, yes. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So this Chardonnay I get from the Frost Ranch, which is their vineyard across the street and about a half mile down from their estate.
Okay.
And so all the Chardonnay blocks on the Frost Ranch, they grafted from the Paris block, from the famous Paris block at the estate. But it's not there. It's if you know where McCrosty is, of course, it's on that stretch right there.
Okay. All right. Very cool. Yeah, I love this wine, and it's, like I said, it's just in stark contrast to the first one that we were tasting.
Yes. I like that. Since we only have a few Chardonnays,
right?
I love to have something completely different.
Right. Well, and I'm the kind of person that I personally got into wine because of food, and so having that kind of option for when you want something a little bit more voluptuous to go with some, a meal that's a little bit more voluptuous, but you want a white wine, So I'm always thinking about those kinds of things when I'm tasting through wines as well.
Exactly. And when we used to have customers here, back, pre-COVID days, it was great because we would, Carrie would line up, the tasting, and it was almost like, it was pretty much 50-50 all the time. Like 50%, preferred the Pratt, 50% loved the Baci. So, you were.
Yeah. When you put them side by side, that's when you can tell the stark difference. If you just poured them one at a time, people would say, oh, this is really good. And then you forget and you pour them the second one and, oh, this is really good. Side by side, people are like, wow, this one is, I like this one for this reason. And I like this one for that reason.
Well, and I have to say too, just to kind of, if anybody ends up watching this video, just to kind of clarify, the difference is not in the winemaking. It's not that one is heavy-handed in the winemaking at all. It's really in the expression of the fruit itself, which again is something that I really appreciate, because a lot of times when you get what someone would assume is a heavier Chardonnay, to them that means like, oh, it's like extra mellow and extra oaky, and now I'm drinking like just like a heavy, gluey kind of white wine. And this is not that. It's still very fresh, and it's still very dominant in those primary fruit flavors. It's just like these subtle background noises, of this kind of secondary characteristics, but the fruit really shines through. And so it's just an expression of, like you said, two different sites, what the vintage did to this one versus this one. So it's very well handled, I think.
I'm sorry.
No, go
on
ahead.
the back of the Pratt card, you'll notice there are ballet slippers, the same as you have going on back there.
Yeah, I love the little.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, we were talking about the kind of music and artistic background of everything. So with the red wines, we can move on to the red wines. I think I started with just the Sonoma Coast one, but what do you recommend between the
Definitely
two?
Sonoma Coast.
To start with the Sonoma Coast one. Yeah, that's what I had done when I was tasting through myself. And just so we know, the picture goes with this one. It's a nice swanky little speakeasy.
Yeah.
I love it. It reminds me of back when we could go out. One of my favorite little bars back when I used to live in San Jose was this place that I don't remember what it was called, because we just called it Speakeasy, because you went downstairs and you sat in little booths like this, and it was just like, I'm so eager to go outside and play again.
we miss those, don't we? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. And so you were saying that you guys were hosting guests, before all of this amazingness happened. So when people do come and taste, I mean, do you have a tasting room set up, or is it just like in your private, where do people go and visit you?
Well, before the winery was built in 08, James would do all tastings right here where we're sitting in the house.
Okay.
And the winery was built, the upstairs level was storage, etc. And so we always just had a big wooden table right in the middle of the production room, and we would sit, and that's where we got 75% of our list members, was by word of mouth and sitting at that table. Well, in 2015, when we turned into a custom crush facility and we had 10 clients making their wines in our winery, James said, Carrie, you're going to have to change upstairs into a tasting room, because instead of just doing Pinot and Chard like we were doing for MacPhail, we now had 28 varietals among 13 clients. So there's always something happening. There was never a time to have a table in the middle of the production room because there's Cab or Merlot. So we built a tasting room upstairs, and it's so awesome. And unfortunately, it's growing cobwebs on it right now. So we do tastings at the bar, or we have a table with wheels, and we wheel it around the crush pad. So
that's great. So you share your tasting room situation with your clients.
Yeah.
So your customers can taste not just Tongue Dancer, but other people that you help create wines for.
Yeah, so we have, out of the 13, we have 5 that have O2s. Yeah, there's 5 brands in here that have their O2, so they can legally do tastings. Okay. Yes, Diana Lee is in here with her Flaunt sparkling brand, also doing still wine now. Adam Lee has his Beau Marché product,
Front Porch Farms.
Front Porch Farms. Yeah, so they'll do tastings here. Yeah. Okay,
that's great. So looking at the Sonoma Coast, you were kind of mentioning earlier about how this one is a little bit of a blend of different vineyards. Do you want to talk a little bit more about that and what went into this? I think this is the 2017? Yeah, 2017.
Yeah, so what is really interesting about this Sonoma Coast Pinot is that, like I said earlier, one component comes from the Putnam Vineyard, which is one of my favorite vineyards out on the coast. Annapolis, and it's about 5 miles in from the Pacific, Second Ridge. Fantastic vineyard. So there's a component of that in here. And then as you move easterly in the Appalachian, there is the Placida Vineyard, which sits right next door to Dellinger, kind of that Vine Hill, Laguna area. Yeah. So kind of Green Valley. And then the third component, like I was saying earlier, barrel came from a client that I was making wine for, from the Vanderkamp Vineyard. And the Vanderkamp Vineyard is a well-known kind of historic vineyard up on Sonoma Mountain. So what's really interesting is you have 3 vineyards in very distinct spots of the Sonoma Coast, all considered cool climate, but
for different reasons.
Exactly. Yeah. So it's a really interesting, for that, I think it's really kind of fascinating.
Yeah, no, it's interesting because it doesn't, for people that are interested in like, a sense of terroir and things like that, always looking for single vineyards. And this very much gives that sense, despite that it is a blend of the 3 different vineyards. And I think, to your point, it being cool climates, but like we said, for different reasons, near the ocean, in a fog pocket, and then up in the mountain, you get some kind of uniformity to it,
really
but still a lot of complexity in the fruits.
Yeah, I think it's a great kind of example of what you can do with Sonoma Coast Pinot. So yeah, so in the winemaking, similar to the Chardonnay, my practices are a little bit more kind of old school, kind of classic Burgundy practices in the cellar. All the fruits, hand picked, hand sorted. I do a cold soak on everything, so about 5 days. Suspend that pre-fermentation, soak the fruit, get a little bit more structure, color. I like native fermentations if I can, but other than those that say they do it for marketing reasons, I am someone that you really got to listen to, the vintage and the vineyard, so if it warrants a native fermentation, great, I'll let it go. If not, I will use a commercial yeast.
Better safe than sorry.
Yeah, exactly. Cooler fermentation, so I like a little bit more, fruit expression. But all our punch downs are by hand. It's a non-mechanized winery, so everything's old school by hand. And then like the Chardonnay as well, everything's aged surly. So when I put Pinot Noir to barrel, it stays. I don't rack it during its life of aging. I let it age surly, and I do a lot of battonage on the Pinot as well.
Okay. And what kind of barrels do you like for your Pinots?
So I'm a little bit of a Cooper geek. I love
I'm into it.
Yeah, I love my Coopers. So I think I'm down to 16 Coopers.
Wow.
All 15 are from Burgundy, and then one's from Italy. But they use French oak, but they move it to their mill in Tuscany and age it there. But like I was saying earlier, for the Chardonnay, I am a very subtle French oak user. I mean, I don't like anything really over medium toast. So, and I keep the percentage new down to about 30%, 30-35%, which I feel is kind of, again, we want that oak to be, integrated and to be a complement, not boom, in your face. But it's there, gives that structure, gives that wood tannin, and a nice little flavor component as well.
Yeah, no, it does. It adds just just the slightest little hints of I almost got chocolate and vanilla, but it's just a very subtle background to the fruits. And yeah, the other thing I was going to say is the tannins on here are just they just kiss your palate. It's very delicately done, very fine grained. The wine itself goes down so smooth.
Also, this one, the 17, it's taken some time. When we released it in 19, it was delicious, but over the last 2 years, it has really softened up beautifully. We have one client in New York that bought 10 cases because he hosts a party every month in his house with his wine friends. And he keeps bringing this out and putting it in a paper bag and tasting it among all of his friends. And he says, it has changed every month and everyone thinks it's a different wine. And it's the same wine every single time. And so now they're like, is this the Sonoma Coast from Tonga Wines? And he just texted me the other day and he says, it's finally coming around to where you can open it, pour it, and drink it right now without having to lay it down or decant it or anything. And so I love that James's wines are so gutsy right out of the bottle, because then it applies to different kinds of tastes. If you like big wines, drink it now. If you like a softer wine, give it a couple of years.
Yeah, no, and I think it is, like you said, it's what we call in this house gluggable at the moment. You got it. It's got a gluggable rating of 10 out of 10. So yeah, it's light, it's delicate. It really is very well balanced wine, and it's kind of interesting to hear that it was any burlier. It's just so light on its feet right now.
Yes.
The 17s were a little great word, burlier. When they first came out. I remember this one was kind of really rustic.
Yeah, rustic is also
came
a good
out,
word.
and it's unlike the 18, or the 19 that we just bottled or something. It needed that time. Again, it's more vintage, vintage driven, which is kind of my winemaking as well. It's what we got.
Sure.
17, it's interesting because every wine has a personality based on the vintage. And we've nailed down 14, 15, and 16 and 18. 17 was always an anomaly for us, and we finally were able to wrap our mind around it because it's such a moving entity. But we picked at that heat right before the heat wave in September, before everything just came right up to the surface, and then it happened rains and then the fires. So it's a tumultuous year, and it was a roller coaster every year. And so we figure 17's like that. So it keeps you on your toes. It's an emotional year.
Yeah. I have to ask, since you brought that up, I know the 17 fires were a bit different, especially if you're Pinot and Chard focused. You pick a little bit earlier, but with the 2020 fires, it kind of happened right at the peak time so did that at all affect your harvesting and your wine production for 2020? Yes, everybody's nodding their head, yes. Yeah.
So for all our clients here in Grape Wagon, I think we took in about 50% projected.
Wow.
And then for all my clients, I averaged left about 80% out there. I think it only took just shy about 20% of the production for everyone.
And was that mostly due to the smoke taint analysis coming back with such high numbers, or was the fruit actually damaged? You couldn't even pick it if you wanted to?
So that was, I'm sure you've heard these stories of the frustration that we experienced with our main wine lab, inundated and got backlogged. So we couldn't get, our analysis in time to make informed and good decisions. So I would say that maybe, 70% of the fruit that I left out there, we were able to get analysis on, and yes, the numbers were high enough that we didn't want to pick it. But the other 30% was, kind of an agreement with the grower saying, vineyard next door got some numbers and they were high, or something that we made an agreement to do that. So just a little sidebar, when we started this tasting, and I had mentioned that I sold to the Hess Collection and my previous brand in 2011. One of the reasons why I was sold was because I was in 2008. The majority of my production was from Anderson Valley. And so I experienced the smoke taint, the loss of an entire vintage in 2008, 12 years ago. So I had a little bit of, that kind of the historical knowledge, I'm not the elder veteran, but I call myself kind of like that younger veteran, about 28 years. So I've gone through a smoke taint vintage and experienced, what it does and everything else. So I had a little bit going in, a knowledge that some of my peers didn't, and to be able to make, decisions. But yes, this was different because it started in August.
Right.
A lot of the recent fires were October, so it really only affected cab producers or something,
the later varieties.
Affected all of us.
Right.
But on a good note, to finish this subject, the Chardonnays, awesome, phenomenal.
Awesome.
All my peers were all kind of like really, really, something came out of this vintage that was, exceptional. And so we're really trying to drive home to everyone that don't blanket the whole vintage, because the Chardonnays are beautiful.
All right, 2020 is the year of the Chardonnay. Just putting it out there.
And rosé.
Yeah, sure. And sparkling wines, Yeah, I mean, up until that happened, we were having a fantastic vintage, right? I mean, we had like rain when we wanted it. We had enough sun when we wanted it. Everything was going to plan, but you know what they say about making plans?
That's right.
You shouldn't do it. You shouldn't do it.
Yeah.
So let's then talk about this last wine, and we'll just throw up this photo right here. It's very jazzy. It's very free form and jazzy. Actually, that's a great way to describe this wine. It is a little free form and jazzy, and I'm digging it. And now I'm spacing on. Oh, this is Putnam Vineyards. Yes.
Yeah. So I mentioned earlier, this is probably one of my, well, it is. It's probably one of my top 3 vineyards. Annapolis Ridge Road, like I said, about 5 miles in from the Pacific, second ridge in. Just an absolutely, like, if you could like beam us all up right now, kind of do a Scotty Star Trek thing and transport us out there right now. It's that vineyard that I would take everyone to. It's, if it didn't take an hour and 10 minutes on a very, very, very windy road, it's the vineyard I would take everyone to, because surrounded by redwoods, on kind of a knoll, ridge top, undulating vineyard, just beautiful. So
yeah, I actually did a let me see if I can. I'm not always great at this, but can you see my screen?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, there you go. Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So I actually found it. Oh, here it is.
Yeah.
Let's see if we can zoom in, because I was like, oh, I have not heard of this vineyard, and sure enough, you can see it is completely surrounded by these redwoods. And then actually, so I'm studying for my WSET, so I love Google Earth because it just shows you all the terroir. But you can see like the angle of the vineyard is, kind of facing the ocean side there.
So
yeah, very
Stacy,
cool.
click out just a little bit, and just kind of, I'm sorry, click in. Yeah, keep going, keep going. So I want to go.
You want to go out.
Oh, I want to go out. Sorry, I want to go out. So click out. Yeah, negative. Sorry.
No worries.
Keep going. Stop.
Yep.
Stop right there. Oh,
go
too
in.
far. So there is a section of the vineyard that is by 4-wheel drive access only. That I get for another client, and it's like there's a resident bald eagle in the vineyard, and I mean, it's just, you can see the terroir out there. It's just magical. So
yeah. No, it's amazing. And then the ocean is, as the crow flies, not that far. So you do get those, I'm sure you get the nice fog in the morning and all of that great stuff.
So so what happens out there is the fruit set in May, it's always so cold that the berries that set are really, really tiny. And most of them are, no seed or 1 seed berries. So they're almost like BBs.
Yeah.
So this wine is, not manipulated. I don't manipulate any of my wines, but I mean, this is naturally intense and concentrated just by the size of the berries.
That's fantastic.
It's really, and of course it's extremely low yield, out there. I think they average about 1.7 to 1.8 tons an acre. Farming, of course, is very expensive because no one wants to go out there. It's hard to harvest and, get the fruit. But it's special, when you talk about, all these great vineyards, that what makes it special, and this has got it. So
yeah, for sure. Like I said, I had never heard of it before, so that's why I had to bring up the map. I'm like, where is that? It's amazing.
There's not many of us. the other big producer that's in there is Dutton Goldfield.
Okay.
So Dan does he calls it Redwood Ridge. That's his bottling
Okay.
from the Putnam Vineyard.
Mm-hmm.
McCroskey does a Putnam.
Hmm.
And then one of my clients, the Calling, we do a vineyard designate from the Putnam, from the four-wheel drive access only vineyard, which is cool.
Must be super fun during harvest.
It is. Yeah, it's super fun to go out there. It's always my Sunday vineyard. That's I don't know why, but like it's just that perfect vineyard to go visit on a Sunday, take a little Sunday drive, and
getting your Zen like Buddha like state of mind and just
absolutely. Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah.
For sure. I was going to ask, I know some clones tend to be a little bit more concentrated than others, in their fruit expression. Does that have anything to do with this wine or the selection of blocks maybe that you pick out there?
No, absolutely. That's a great question and great identification, because 115, 667, I think there's what I think really gives us that unique flavor profile is there's a little bit of Calera in there.
My favorite.
And then there's also, yeah, right? It is my favorite too. And then we also get a little bit of what they call the Flowers clone. And so when Flowers established their Camp Meeting Ridge out there, there was some cuttings that were purported to be from Latache, and they made the rounds in vineyards, and but they called it the Flowers clone. And there's some of that as well. And from some of the other Latache that I get in other vineyards, I think it is. I would say that it is, because naturally those berries are like super, super small, very small clusters, small berries. It's definitely along those lines. So, yeah.
I have to say, like, I've enjoyed all of your wines. I love all of your wines. I'm so glad that I've somehow found you. But this is probably my favorite thing that I've tasted today.
Good.
The one that I'm going to save for date night. Like, this is officially a fancy wine.
And then, as you know, we this is kind of cool. This changes each year. So each vintage, we change the Cadillac because we can, right? So we started kind of a collector's series of these when we started in 14. So each vintage is different. It's a different Cadillac.
So keep the bottle is what I'm hearing.
Yes. Yeah.
So do you change like the color, the year, or just like everything about it?
Everything. The whole car is a different year. Yeah.
That's crazy and cool. I love it. I love your labels. I love your wines.
Like 2016, that was that was my 50th. So we did it 1966, Cadillac, and then kind of mostly 40s and 50s. We've changed it around. So.
Okay, cool. Yeah. So, we tasted through the wines. I just kind of want to open up to you. Is there anything new that you're working on? Anything that, again, if anybody decides to watch this video, that they should know about you, your lovely other half, about Tongue Dancer wines in general?
You have something.
What?
You said yes.
Well, I was just thinking of what's coming down the pipeline.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
So, one of the very cool things, when we left MacPhail, it was really hard. Of course, that was 15 years of customers and relationships. And when we started Tongue Dancer Wines, we started with 50 cases, and now we're up to 1,000 cases. And we're still by appointment only. We're still on a rural road in an unincorporated part of Healdsburg, although we're 2 miles from town. And when we had to shut down, I had to take Talk reservation system off of the website, but we still were getting calls and emails and texts saying, when can we come? When can we come? Well, 2020, because we couldn't see anybody, we put our heads together and we said, okay, what are we going to do that's going to create relevance? And that's one thing in this business. You know, when James first started, you know, there were 20 Pinot producers. Now there's 200. And trying to stay front and center and trying to stay relevant is challenging sometimes. So James came up with a really great idea of making a rosé just in magnums called the Rosé de Ville. So it's going to have a pink Cadillac on there, and it's going to be sold in magnums only. And that gets released in 3 weeks. But we're just constantly on our toes. Virtual tastings are kind of a big deal for us because we're super private people. And so this is a big deal, by the way, for us to be doing this.
Well, thank you.
We're super hermits. But I think 2020 has made people more appreciative of coming here and sitting down and just talking about family and just talking about what you did for the last year. And, you know, so there's nothing in the pipeline other than being more mindful of our clients and wanting that more than anything. And James's hands are always in so many different vineyard pies. And the CFO of the company is like, can you get this vineyard? Can you get this vineyard? How about if we do this? So it's a everyday fun, creative thing.
Awesome.
And are you finding yourself more and more in demand doing these type of interviews?
You know, virtual tastings are definitely more than they used to before the pandemic. But I find them to be very rewarding in that, you know, I can't always be everywhere. I can't, you know, I'm fairly close to Healdsburg, so that's a plus. But, you know, for friends, winemakers in Central Coast or, you know, even in the South Bay, it does make it easier to communicate and open up the wine world via virtual tastings. And, you know, when I do more public tastings where there's a group of us, it's really, you know, interesting to see that, you know, you can grab a bunch of folks, you know, whether traditional or not media, from different areas, you know, East Coast, smack dab in the middle, West Coast. So, you know, I think it has its rewards as well as its challenges. I'm very much like you. I like seeing people. I miss shaking people's hands.
Yeah.
You know, I miss taking the tours in person and things like that. So I'm very excited to get back into doing that. But you know, I think moving forward, I think virtual tastings are something, at least from a you know, a business perspective, that should probably continue.
Yes.
Yeah, they're here.
And but there's you know, as everybody says, there's no replacing real interaction with people. And you know, wine, I think we're of the same mindset that, you know, wine is one of those things that it's very personal, and to share it in person makes it all that much more personal. So those are my thoughts.
Perfect. Yeah, well said.
Yeah.
Yeah, good.
Well, thank you guys so much for joining me this afternoon and taking time and sharing your beautiful wines. I mean, these, like I said, they're all wonderful, wonderful expressions. They're all unique. You know, so many times you taste like someone's, you know, 3, 4, 5 red wines, and by the 5th one, you're like, how are these different? I mean, these are seriously very unique expressions of time and place. I want to emphasize that it's not a winemaking differentiation per se. It's more of an expression of the actual fruit, which again is something that it takes a delicate hand to do that. So
thank you. Good. So we wanted for tongue dancer.
Yeah, no, I mean, my tongue is dancing, so.
Good. All right, well, thank you, Stacy, appreciate it.
Thank you so much. And you guys know how to reach me if you have any questions, comments, concerns, or want to share more of your story or wine.
We'll be back.
We will.
Next vintage.
Awesome.
All right.
Thank you.
Okay.
All right, Stacy.
Bye.
Bye.